He shoved my friend so hard, she crashed over the coffee table. The bruise on her back wasn't just an accident. It was a brand burned into my memory. I'm not the kind of guy who throws punches. I've never been in a fight, never wanted to be. But that night, staring at her tear-streaked face, I felt something shift inside me. Rage doesn't always need fists. Sometimes it needs patience, precision, and the right opportunity. And I knew exactly where to strike: his education. When Sarah showed up at our door that night, I could already tell something was broken inside her. Her voice cracked on the phone, but it didn't prepare me for the way she looked when she walked in. Shoulders hunched, eyes swollen, like she was holding herself together with tape. My girlfriend Lucy let her in, and the moment Sarah stepped across the threshold, she collapsed into our couch like she'd been running from something all night. I sat there, silent, trying not to push, waiting for her to talk. It took a few minutes, but finally the words poured out, about Jay, about the fight, about how he accused her of cheating just because she spent time with us. The insults he hurled at her, the venom in his voice. She said she tried to walk out, and that's when he shoved her. He didn't slap her, he didn't punch her, but sometimes a shove says more. She tripped over the coffee table and landed hard enough to bruise. Lucy told me later the mark on her lower back was massive. Sarah, of course, tried to downplay it. He's never done that before. It was an accident. He just lost his temper. I could hear her trying to convince herself, but I couldn't unhear the tremor in her voice when she said it, or the way her hands kept rubbing at her arms, like she was cold even though the heater was on. I've never been a violent guy. I'm a big dude. Yeah, but fighting? That was never me. And yet as I sat there, listening to her blame herself for his outburst, something in me snapped. I wanted to drive across town, rip his door off its hinges, and make him regret laying a hand on her. But I knew if I did that, I'd just end up in a cell while he kept living his life. That wasn't justice. That was stupidity. So I sat back, clenched my fists, and thought. I worked at the college administration building. I had access. Student records, ID numbers, class schedules. I saw them every day. Normally, it was just routine data entry, nothing special. But that night, that little detail turned into a weapon. The deadline to change classes was coming up, the last day to add or drop without special permission. A ticking clock, and I had the means to reach it before Jay did. The thought crept in slow, almost like a joke at first. What if someone just pulled the rug from under his semester? But the more I sat with it, the sharper the idea became. Sarah was still talking, Lucy rubbing her shoulder to calm her down, but I wasn't really listening anymore. My mind had shifted. I could see the path forming in front of me. Not a fist fight, not a screaming match, but something cleaner, more devastating. Jay thought he could shove my friend and walk away from it. But he had no idea that I was already building a trap he wouldn't see coming. And that night, the plan for his downfall was born. The next morning, the anger was still there. I woke up with it buzzing in my chest, like an alarm that wouldn't shut off. Lucy made coffee, Sarah was still asleep on the couch, and I just sat at the table, staring into my mug. My hands were steady, but inside I was a storm. Every time I blinked, I saw her face when she walked in, shaking, broken, trying to defend the man who hurt her. I left for my shift at the administration building early. Too early. Normally, I'd kill time in the parking lot, scroll through my phone, wait for my actual start. That morning, I went straight inside. The office was quiet, just the faint hum of old computers and the smell of stale carpet. I logged in with my student employee credentials like I always did. Nothing out of the ordinary. But my pulse quickened anyway, because this time I wasn't here just to file paperwork or print transcripts. I typed his name into the system, Jay. It felt almost surreal, seeing his information pop up on the screen like he was just another student. His classes, his ID number, his fees. Everything laid out in front of me like an open diary. And suddenly the idea wasn't just an idea. It was real. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and a rush of electricity shot through me. I had the power to end his semester right here. But my conscience bit back. This wasn't just petty revenge. This was serious. If I dropped him from his classes, it would be a nightmare for him. Late fees, lost credits. And then the realization hit me harder than anything else. Jay was a foreign student. I remembered him mentioning it once at a game night, how complicated the paperwork was, how he needed to maintain a certain number of credits just to stay in the country. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. If I pulled the trigger on this, it wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It could destroy everything for him. his education, his visa, his future here. It was like holding a live grenade in my hands. One keystroke, and his entire life could implode. For a moment, I hesitated. Maybe it was too much. Maybe I was crossing a line. My job wasn't supposed to be a weapon. But then I thought about Sarah's bruises. I thought about the way she tried to smile through her tears, making excuses for a man who shoved her like she was nothing. And the anger roared back. The timing was perfect. The deadline to add or drop was just days away. After that, he'd be locked into whatever happened. And if he showed up to class and found his name missing, there'd be nothing he could do. I closed out of his record before I did something impulsive. Not yet, but the seed was planted, and it was growing fast. By the end of that shift, I wasn't asking myself if I should do it anymore. I was asking myself how far I was willing to go. By the time the weekend rolled around, the idea wasn't a whisper in the back of my head anymore. It was a drumbeat. Every time I opened the system to process a transcript or answer a student's question, I saw Jay's record in my mind like it was waiting for me. I couldn't shake it. Monday came, and with it the last possible day to make schedule changes without special permission. My stomach was in knots, but it wasn't nerves, it was anticipation. I told Lucy I had extra hours at work, but the truth was I wanted the office quiet. No distractions, just me and the plan. When the last student walked out and the phone stopped ringing, I pulled up his record again. There it was, his full schedule. For classes, carefully picked. General Ed, English, a math requirement, some elective. All of it tied neatly together like a thread holding his entire semester intact. And right beneath it, the option I knew would be there. Drop class. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over the mouse. One click, and it would vanish. One click, and the dominoes would start to fall. I thought of Sarah sitting on my couch with tears running down her face. I thought of her trying to convince herself that what he did wasn't that bad. I thought of how easily it could have been worse. So I clicked. The first class disappeared from the list. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't hypothetical anymore. His record changed right in front of me. I clicked again, and again, and again. Within minutes, every single class on his schedule was gone. Jay wasn't enrolled in a single course anymore. But I didn't stop there. Not yet. I scrolled through the catalog and started adding. Not classes he wanted. Not classes he'd ever choose. Classes with mandatory fees attached. Lab courses, materials courses, anything that would leave a bill in his account. Because at this school, unpaid fees meant no transcripts, no registration, no future until you paid up. When I was finished, his schedule looked insane. Random classes that didn't connect, half of them already full, each one carrying a price tag he'd never agreed to. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my pulse racing like I'd just run a marathon. For a second, I thought I might throw up. The reality of what I'd just done hit me all at once. This wasn't a prank. This was someone's life, and I'd just taken it apart with a few keystrokes. And yet, under the wave of adrenaline, there was something else. Satisfaction. Cold, clean satisfaction. Jay wanted control. He wanted to make Sarah afraid. Now he was the one who'd wake up to find the ground ripped out from under him. And the best part? He wouldn't even know who pulled the trigger. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his empty schedule flashing on the screen. My brain replayed the clicks like a guilty metronome. Drop, drop, drop. But beneath the guilt was something else. A thrill. Like I'd pulled off a perfect heist, and no one even knew it happened. The next morning, I walked back into the administration building like nothing had changed. Smiled at the receptionist, grabbed my stack of forms, logged in as if I was just another underpaid student worker. But when the screen lit up, I couldn't resist. I searched Jay's record again. Sure enough, it was chaos. His classes were gone. In their place, a Frankenstein's monster of random electives and lab courses, each one demanding extra fees. I pictured him sitting at his desk, logging in, and seeing it all. The confusion, the panic, the way he'd scrambled to fix it, only to realize it was too late. The deadline had already passed. That's when it hit me harder than before. Jay wasn't just some jerk from around town. He was a foreign student, which meant that if he wasn't enrolled in the right number of credits, he couldn't legally stay in the country. The realization slammed into me like a freight train. I hadn't just sabotaged his semester. I might have sabotaged his entire life here. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. My hands felt cold, even though the office was warm. Was this too far? Did I just make myself the villain in someone else's story? But then I thought of Sarah. The bruise. The way she flinched when she said his name. The excuses she made because admitting the truth was too painful. And my guilt twisted into something else, resolve. Maybe it was harsh. Maybe it was nuclear. But sometimes nuclear was exactly what someone deserved. The funny thing about revenge is how invisible it can be. No one in that building had any idea what I'd done. I looked like just another kid at a desk, punching in numbers. But behind the glow of the monitor, I'd pulled the rug out from under a man who thought he could use fear to control someone. By lunchtime, the weight of what I'd done had shifted. At first it felt heavy, like a crime. But the more I replayed Sarah's tears in my head, the lighter it became. It didn't feel like sabotage anymore. It felt like justice. And yet, there was still one question I couldn't shake. What would happen when he showed up to class and realized he wasn't on the roster? That thought lingered with me like a storm cloud, growing darker by the hour. Because I knew when that moment came, I'd finally see the payoff of what I'd set in motion. And I wasn't sure if I was more nervous or excited to hear how it all went down. The weekend crept in, but I couldn't enjoy it. Every moment felt stretched thin, like I was living in two realities at once. On the outside, I was the same guy, helping Lucy with groceries, pretending to study, trying to laugh when Sarah came by to watch a movie. But on the inside, every beat of my heart was synced to one thought. What happens when Jay finds out? I kept picturing the scene in my head. Him storming into the registrar's office, demanding answers, his accent sharp, his anger spilling over the desk. The staff shaking their heads, showing him the official roster with his name missing. Him realizing too late that the deadline was gone. And then the panic, that gut-deep panic, when he understood the ripple effect. No credits, no full-time status, no visa. The thought was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Saturday night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my laptop open, staring at the course catalog again. It was insane how easy it had been. No backdoors, no hacking, just routine access I was trusted with. Part of me wanted to check his record again, just to see the disaster I'd left behind. But another part of me screamed not to. The less digital fingerprints, the better. Lucy noticed I was distant. "You okay?" she asked, curling up next to me. I forced a smile, muttered something about exams, and kissed her forehead. She seemed satisfied, but guilt burned in my stomach. She didn't know the storm I'd set loose. And I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. By Sunday morning, the guilt was louder. What if this ruined him more than I intended? What if he got deported, lost everything? Was I prepared to carry that? But then I remembered Sarah's voice, trembling as she said, "He just lost his temper. It was an accident." No, it wasn't an accident. It was control. It was intimidation. It was violence. Maybe not a punch, maybe not a broken bone, but it was the start of something that could have escalated. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting on our couch, rubbing her arms like she was trying to disappear. That memory anchored me. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for her. For every bruise someone tried to excuse. For every girl who convinced herself that it's not that bad. Sunday night, I made my decision, no turning back. I wouldn't check his record again. I wouldn't confess to anyone. I'd sit in the shadows and let the system do the work for me. If karma needed a push, then I'd already given it the shove it deserved. But even as I told myself that, sleep wouldn't come easy. My body felt restless, my mind buzzing with what-ifs. Still, one thought kept me steady. Tomorrow is Tuesday. His English class. That's when the fallout begins. And I couldn't decide if I was dreading it or craving it. Tuesday came like a slow drum roll. I couldn't focus on anything. Every sound in the office, every shuffle of papers, every ring of the phone felt like background noise to the only thought that mattered. Today he'll find out. Sarah had an English class with Jay that morning. Normally, she dreaded it. The day before, she told Lucy she wasn't sure she could face him yet. But Lucy convinced her she had to go. Skipping class meant letting him win. I agreed, though secretly, I had another reason for wanting her there. I needed eyes on the ground. I needed to know if my plan had worked. I spent the morning jittery, pretending to process enrollment forms while my brain spun in circles. Then, at 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Just one line. "You're not going to believe this." My heart leapt into my throat. I typed back quickly, "What happened?" She replied almost instantly. "He showed up, but there weren't enough seats. He had to stand in the back. The teacher noticed the class was overbooked, so she did roll call. His name wasn't on the list." He tried to argue. but she had the official roster. He's not enrolled. He looked furious, like he didn't understand what was happening. I read the message 3 times, my pulse hammering harder with each pass. It worked. He'd walked into that room thinking he still had control, and instead the ground vanished beneath him. For a brief moment, I felt something close to relief. The plan had landed. He was humiliated in front of the class, stripped of his authority, left standing while everyone else took their seats. For Sarah, it was a clean break, proof she didn't have to fear seeing him every Tuesday anymore. I leaned back in my chair, letting the rush wash over me. Maybe this was enough. Maybe I didn't need to check his record again, didn't need to know if he got kicked out of school entirely. He was already inconvenienced, embarrassed, maybe even knocked down a peg or two. That should have been enough. But as the hours passed, that sense of relief began to curdle. Because I realized I hadn't just dropped him from one class. I'd dropped him from all of them. I'd tied his account up with fees. I'd set in motion something far bigger than a moment of embarrassment. Sarah's texts trickled in throughout the day. She said Jay never came back to that class again. No dramatic confrontations, no yelling in the hallways. Just absence. He vanished from her schedule like a ghost. On the surface, it looked like victory. Clean, quiet, bloodless. For Sarah, it meant peace. For me, it meant knowing I'd struck a blow he couldn't block. But beneath that victory was an unsettling truth gnawing at me. I'd opened a door I couldn't close, and I had no idea just how far the consequences would reach. At first, the silence felt like victory. Days went by, and Sarah never mentioned seeing Jay again. No more run-ins in the hallways, no awkward glances in class, no tension hanging over her every Tuesday. She even started to look lighter, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. But silence is tricky. It can be peaceful, or it can mean something's brewing. By the end of the week, I started noticing little shifts around the administration office. Whispers between staff, a supervisor pacing with a furrowed brow, one of the senior clerks muttering about some kind of enrollment screw-up. My chest tightened every time I overheard a fragment. They weren't saying names, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. One afternoon, while delivering paperwork, I walked past the registrar's office and heard raised voices. A male voice, loud, angry, thick with an accent. My blood ran cold. Jay. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I was sure someone would hear it. Not possible. I was enrolled. You made a mistake. His voice cracked with rage. The registrar's calm reply followed. Sir, the records show you dropped these courses before the deadline. We cannot reinstate you without special authorization, and those classes are now full. I didn't wait to hear more. I ducked around the corner, pretending to shuffle papers, my ears burning with every word. He was fighting, clawing for a way back in, but the system, the very machine he thought he could rely on, wasn't giving him an inch. That should have felt good. Satisfaction. Proof my plan worked flawlessly. But instead, a new weight settled on me. Because if he kept pushing, if he demanded an investigation, someone might start tracing logins. Someone might look for fingerprints I'd left behind. That night, I couldn't eat. Lucy noticed me picking at my food. Rough day at work? She asked. I mumbled something about deadlines, but inside, my mind was spiraling. What if they figured it out? What if this got back to me? What if the police showed up at my door for tampering with official records? Worse still, what if Jay connected the dots himself? He wasn't stupid. He knew Sarah spent time with us. He knew I worked in administration. If he thought even for a second that I had the access to pull something like this off, I didn't even want to imagine the fallout. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the room pitch black, Lucy's breathing soft beside me. For the first time, I wasn't just angry at Jay, I was scared of him. If he ever discovered the truth, his fury would make that shove look like nothing. The next morning, I made a choice. No more peeking at his record, no more feeding my curiosity. The less trail I left, the better. I'd done what I set out to do, now I had to live with it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not for him. Not for me. And when the fallout finally came, it was bigger than anything I'd prepared for. The following week was torture. I walked into work every day with my stomach twisted into knots, waiting for the hammer to fall. The registrar's office was buzzing more than usual. Papers stacked high, phones ringing non-stop, stressed voices carrying through the thin walls. Every time I heard the word enrollment, my chest tightened like a vice. I avoided looking at Jay's file, but that didn't stop my imagination from filling in the blanks. In my mind, I saw him at home, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. I pictured him clutching his phone, trying to call the international student office, only to be told the same thing over and over. Without full enrollment, you cannot maintain your visa. The reality of what I had done finally hit me in full. This wasn't just about one class, or even one semester. I might have set in motion his expulsion, his deportation, the unraveling of everything he'd built here. And for the first time, I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Did he really deserve all of that? Part of me screamed yes. He shoved Sarah. He left a bruise on her body and a deeper one on her spirit. He humiliated her, controlled her, made her doubt her own worth. He deserved punishment. But deportation? Ruined transcripts? A destroyed future? That was more than revenge. It was annihilation. The guilt was suffocating. I couldn't tell Lucy, couldn't confide in Sarah, couldn't tell a soul. It was my secret, and it was rotting me from the inside. At night, I lay awake, staring into the dark, replaying the moment I clicked drop class. The sound of that mouse click echoed in my head louder than any shout or slammed door. Then came Tuesday again, Sarah's English class. She sent Lucy a quick text after. He wasn't there, and he hasn't been since. Lucy read it aloud, relief in her voice, but I felt something else. Dread. Because his absence wasn't closure. It was a void. Where had he gone? What was he doing? Was he still fighting behind the scenes, or had the system chewed him up and spit him out? I wanted to believe it was over, but deep down, I knew better. You don't erase someone's life like that without consequences. Sooner or later, something would give. Either the school would discover what I'd done, or Jay would. And when that day came, I wasn't sure which one scared me more. Walking home that night, the winter air bit into my face, but I barely noticed. My mind was stuck on Sarah's bruise, her tears, her insistence that it was just an accident. I clenched my fists in my pockets, hating Jay, hating myself, hating the thin line between justice and cruelty. For the first time, I wondered if I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And that thought haunted me far more than Jay ever could. 2 weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I told myself 100 times not to, that checking his record again would only leave breadcrumbs back to me. But the silence was unbearable. Jay hadn't been seen in any of Sarah's classes, not in the cafeteria, not even loitering around campus. It was like he'd been erased. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder the question screamed in my head. Was he gone for good? So one late afternoon, when the office was empty and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, I pulled up his file. My hands trembled on the keyboard, sweat prickling at the back of my neck. For a second, I almost hoped the system would block me, that his name would come back, no record found. But no, it was still there. Only it wasn't the same. His schedule was blank. Every last class, gone. Not even the random electives I'd saddled him with remained. The account showed outstanding fees, unresolved balances, and then nothing. No future enrollment. No upcoming courses. Just a student ID tied to a dead end. I sat there, staring at the screen, my throat dry. I didn't need anyone to spell it out for me. He wasn't coming back. Whether it was voluntary withdrawal, administrative action, or immigration paperwork, the result was the same. Jay was out. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The adrenaline rush I'd been chasing for weeks finally hit me full force. I had done it. I'd taken the guy who shoved Sarah, who belittled her, who thought intimidation was love, and I'd torn his foundation out from under him. With a few keystrokes, I'd made sure he couldn't hover over her anymore. For a moment, it felt righteous. Clean. Like I'd restored some kind of balance. Sarah was free of him. He couldn't sit 2 rows behind her, glaring holes into her back. He couldn't twist her words in class or poison her confidence. That was worth it. But as the office clock ticked toward closing time, the euphoria began to fade, leaving only a chill. Because the other truth pressed in on me. I'd gone too far. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't just inconvenience. This was a man's entire education, maybe his legal status in the country, ripped away by my hand. I shut the screen down, logged out, and sat there in the silence. My reflection in the dark monitor looked unfamiliar, eyes hollow, jaw tight. For the first time, I wondered if I'd become the very thing I hated, someone who used power to hurt. But then I remembered Sarah's bruise. Her tears. The way her voice cracked when she said, "He just lost his temper." No, this wasn't cruelty. This was consequence. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and left the office. The hallway echoed with my footsteps, steady and final. Mess with me all you want, but mess with my friends, and I'll make sure you regret it. Weeks passed, and Jay's name was nothing but a ghost on campus. Sarah stopped flinching whenever her phone buzzed. She started laughing more, filling the apartment with the kind of easy joy we'd almost forgotten she had in her. The bruise faded, though the memory of it never left me. And in its place grew something harder, sharper, a reminder of why I'd done what I did. Lucy never knew. To her, Jay just dropped out or transferred, another student who couldn't hack the grind. Sarah never suspected either. She believed the system had finally given her a break, that fate had stepped in and cut him out of her life. Maybe it was better that way. Some truths don't heal. Some truths just stain. But I knew. And every time I walked past the administration building, every time I sat at my desk and logged in, I carried the weight of it. I'd used the very system that trusted me to help students, to guide them, to sabotage someone into oblivion. On paper, I was guilty of academic fraud, maybe worse. If anyone had ever traced it back, I would have been finished. Sometimes, late at night, that thought gnawed at me. I'd lie awake, the room dark and quiet, and wonder, did I become the villain in his story? Was I the faceless hand that destroyed his future while he was left shouting into the void, powerless to fight back? If the roles were reversed, would I call it justice or cruelty? But then I remembered Sarah on our couch, clutching a pillow like a lifeline, trying to excuse a man who shoved her into a table. I remembered the way her voice cracked when she insisted, "He's never done that before." That wasn't an accident. That was the start of something darker. I didn't just save her peace of mind for one semester. I might have saved her from years of escalating violence. So maybe I was harsh. Maybe I overstepped. But if the line between justice and revenge is thin, then I'll live with the knowledge that I crossed it. Because some people don't deserve second chances. Some people only understand consequences when they're staring at the ruins of what they thought was untouchable. The truth is, I'll never know exactly what happened to Jay after that day. Did he pack his bags and leave the country? Did he try another school? Did he tell his family back home a story about how the system failed him? None of it matters. What matters is that Sarah never had to sit in another classroom with him, never had to brace herself for his temper again. And me? I learned something too. I may not be a fighter. My fists may stay clean. But if you hurt the people I care about, I'll find a way to strike back. It won't be loud. It won't be flashy. But it will be final. Looking back, I still question whether I went too far. Whether turning the system against him made me just as bad. But the truth is, I didn't act out of hate. I acted out of loyalty. Out of a gut-deep need to protect someone who couldn't protect herself in that moment. We all like to think we do the right thing when it counts. But sometimes the right thing doesn't come wrapped in neat little rules. Sometimes it's messy, quiet, and no one claps for you afterward. If you've ever watched someone you care about get hurt and felt helpless, if you've ever wanted justice but couldn't find a clean way to get it, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why I did what I did. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. These stories aren't always easy, but they are real. If this one made you feel something, anger, relief, even doubt, hit the like button and drop a comment. Would you have done the same? And if you want more stories like this, raw and honest, go ahead and subscribe. There's always another truth waiting to be told.